meditation is supposed to be fun. It's not something you do as a grim duty. The trouble with religion, as we know it, is that it is so mixed up with grim duties. We do it because it's good for you. It's a kind of self-punishment. Well, meditation, when correctly done, has nothing to do with all that. It's a kind of digging the present. It's a kind of grooving with the eternal now. And brings us into a state of peace where we can understand that the point of life, the place where it's at, is simply here and now.
This moment is the creation of the universe. It's starting now. If you look back and wonder whether there was a big bang a long time ago, all you'll see is vanishing traces. The big bang is happening now. This is when the world begins. You're doing it. Only you're not doing it by straining. A you deeper than the straining you is doing all this. The same you that is growing your hair and coloring your eyes and making your thumbprints and all that. You don't think about it. You don't strain muscles to do it. But that is what is creating the world. Here it comes. Now. So instead of thinking that the past is the reality which explains everything that happens now, let's look at now.
Let's look at now. Such an easy answer, right? Such an easy answer. On the Fringe with Dan RadioStyle. Hope everybody out there's doing great. We are doing the Law of One. This is session 21 and 22. 22 a little bit shorter. Maybe we'll be under an hour tonight. That'd be kind of cool. All said, the first session really kind of gets into the first 75,000 years of our history. I just want to bring in a couple points, though. So we've read in the Bible that back in the day, Noah and all these other people, they lived like 900 years. So we understand there's this concept of longer life. There's also some studies and stories around the idea of the tree of good and evil versus the tree of knowledge, and the potentiality that the tree of knowledge actually meant long life. That was one of the reasons maybe the kicking out of Adam and Eve. They figured out the other stuff, but they're like, whoa, God, if they figure out how to live forever and they procreate, oh my God, they'll live forever and, it'd be like rats, right? Maybe. I mean, it might have been the fear. Whatever the case is, we get into the 75,000, 50,000, 25,000. How many people actually managed to harvest? We've talked about that some already, but also whether or not we have whether or not we got these guys they harvest and then drawing a blank here. How many of them showed up? Anyway, we got now versus then. I don't know where I was going with that. I had some point. Whatever. We've also got lifespans, and I guess I was trying to tie those two together. Yeah, lifespans changed. So way out early on, Ra talks about how lifespans were in that 900-year range, 1,000-year range. And as we've gotten further and further and more dense, which is what many suggest, it has gotten shorter. And I likened it to kind of like what a dog. If you guys think about it, dogs, right? 7 years, right? Every 1 year in a dog, it's 7 years for, or every 1 year of their life, it's 7 years for a dog. And that's kind of how their lives work out. Can you imagine if all of a sudden dogs lived 50 years, or cats? Can you imagine how much more they'd learn, how much more the relationships you would build with them? It's like a parrot or a turtle. I mean, parrots for sure, right? They live like 50 years plus. You build a relationship with these animals. They stress if you stress. It is it's an interesting situation when you think about longevity. And that's one thing they do talk about in one of these today. So lifespans, and then they get into Maldek. It seems that Maldek's where we've kind of inherited this sort of negative group. And many suggest that's what is definitely changing in the coming times. So the negative group will be going bye-bye. There is no way around that. And it's just an issue of not being allowed to reincarnate here. I mean, and it's just they're not going to be allowed to. Their lives are going to be ended. It's just part of like kind of the universal thing. I hope this is actually going. There it is. Cool. It's just part of the law of how it works out. They are not. The Earth wants to move into a positive direction. The Earth has had this negativity on it for a long time. It's going to require some healing to some degree too. So a lot of things happening. So again, we're living the dream in a weird kind of way, and we are all a part of this. And that's kind of one of the things that's not. I mean, I don't know. It's like almost the most fun, in my opinion. It's the stuff that. Where's the raw material we got? No, it's up here. Trying my best to at least put important information on the screen. I really did a bad job firing up today. I was like running around trying to find my phone. A-Score, I'm glad you're out there, by the way. Thank you for questions that we're going to hit up later. Anyway, I'm just a little bit out of sorts. This one kind of caught me off guard a little bit. So sessions 21, 22, we are going to get into this, and I'm going to fire it up, assuming I can actually do that. I had that actually pulled up at one point, but no. Yeah, that would be crazy. There we go. All right, here's session 21. Again, this is back in 1981. This whole transition or the whole thing of time is about like 3 years, it seems, that they go through. I love the fact that, one, Carla is definitely put in a good category of one of the best channelers out there. I definitely agree with that. Another piece of information, I have recently added it to, and it won't show up until the next video I do, but I'm saying it here. But the Jane Roberts, Seth Speaks stuff is some really, really good channeled information. So there's a lot of really, really good stuff out there, and we are learning what has been kept from us for a very, very, very long time. And this is going to be a little bit of a painful time. And so I think Law of One really does help kind of ease us into that in a way that doesn't really break Law of Confusion in any horrible way anyway. All said, here's session 21 on the Fringe. The Law of One, Session 21, recorded February 10th, 1981. Ra, I am Ra. I greet you in the love and the light of the one infinite creator. We communicate now. Questioner, I have a couple of questions I don't want to forget to ask in this period. I'll ask them first. The first question is, would the future content of this book be affected in any way if the instrument reads the material we have already obtained? Ra, I am Ra. The future, as you measure in time-space communications, which we offer through this instrument, have no connection with the instrument's mind complex. This is due to two things. First, the fidelity of the instrument in dedicating its will to the service of the infinite creator. Secondly, the distortion understanding of our social memory complex that the most efficient way to communicate material with as little distortion as possible, given the necessity of the use of sound vibration complexes, is to remove the conscious mind complex from the spirit mind body complex so that we may communicate without reference to any instrument orientation. Questioner, a little appendage to this. Do you use your vocabulary or the instrument's vocabulary to communicate with us? Ra, I am Ra. We use the vocabulary of the language with which you are familiar. This is not the instrument's vocabulary. However, this particular mind-body-spirit complex retains the use of a sufficiently large number of sound vibration complexes that the distinction is often without any importance. Questioner, Andrija Puharic will be visiting later this month. Can he read the unpublished healing material? Ra, I am Ra. The entity of whom you speak has a knowledge of this material in the conscious memory in somewhat altered form. Therefore, it is harmless to allow this entity to become acquainted with the material. However, we request the mind-body-spirit complex Henry be sufficiently prepared by means of meditation, contemplation, or prayer before entering these workings. At present, as we have said before, this mind-body-spirit complex is not of proper vibrational distortion. Questioner, I had already determined to exclude him from these workings. I have only determined to let him read the material. The only other thing is that I have noticed that within the material as it exists now, there is a certain statement which will allow him to understand who I believe Spectra really is. It seems my duty to remove this from his knowledge, to preserve the same free will that you attempted to preserve by not defining the origin of Spectra. His contact in Israel. Am I correct? Ra. I am Ra. This is a matter for your discretion. Questioner. That's what I thought you would say. Well now, let's get back to the business at hand, of doing the book. I want, as we cover the early part of the 75,000 year cycle, I would like to go back a little bit, quite some distance perhaps, before the 75,000 years occurred, and take one more look at the transfer of entities from Maldek to clear up this point. I'd like to check the time that you gave us, because we had some distortion in numbers back in the early part of this, and I'm afraid this might be distorted. These entities from Maldek were transferred from how many years ago? Ra. I am Ra. The entities of which you speak underwent several transitions. The first occurring 500,000 of your years, approximately in your past as you measure time. At this time, the entities were transformed into a knot. This continued for what you would call eons of your time. Those aiding them were repeatedly unable to reach them. At a period approximately 200,000 years, 200,000 years in your past as you measure time, a Confederation entity was able to begin to relax this knot from which none had escaped during the planetary annihilation. These entities then were transformed again into the inner or time-space dimensions and underwent a lengthy process of healing. When this was accomplished, these entities were then able to determine the appropriate movement, shall we say, in order to set up conditions for alleviation of the consequences of their actions. At a time 46000, 46,000 of your years in the past, as you measure time, this being approximate, these entities chose incarnation within the planetary sphere. Questioner. I see. Then no incarnation occurred before this master 75,000 year cycle of Maldek entities, correct? Ra. I am Ra. This is correct in the sense of incarnation in third density time-space. Questioner. Were there any of these entities then incarnated in second density before the 75,000 year cycle? Ra. I am Ra. This is incorrect. These particular entities were incarnate in time-space third density, that is, the so-called inner planes, undergoing the process of healing and approaching realization of their actions. Questioner. I don't mean to be covering ground that we've already covered, but there are some points here that I'm having trouble with fully understanding, and sometimes I have to ask the question a different way to fully understand it. Thank you. So at the start of this 75,000 year cycle, we know that the quarantine was set up. I am assuming that the Guardians were aware of the infringements on free will that would occur if they didn't set this up at the time and therefore did it. Is this correct? Ra. I am Ra. This is partially correct. The incorrectness is as follows. Those entities whose third density experience upon your red planet was brought to a close prematurely were aided genetically while being transferred to this third density. This, although done in a desire to aid, was seen as infringement upon free will. The light quarantine, which consists of the guardians, or gardeners as you may call them, which would have been in effect thus, was intensified. Questioner. Now when the 75,000 year cycle started, the lifespan was approximately 900 years average. What was the process of scheduling of mechanism, shall I say, of reincarnation at that time? And how did the time in between incarnations into third density physical apply to the growth of the mind-body-spirit complex? Ra. I am Ra. This query is more complex than most. We shall begin. The incarnation pattern of the beginning third density mind-body-spirit complex begins in darkness. For you may think or consider of your density as one of, as you may say, a sleep and a forgetting. This is the only plane of forgetting. It is necessary for the third density entity to forget so that the mechanisms of confusion or free will may operate upon the newly individuated consciousness complex. Thus, The beginning entity is one in all innocence oriented towards animalistic behavior, using other selves only as extensions of self for the preservation of the all-self. The entity becomes slowly aware that it has needs, shall we say, that are not animalistic, that is, that are useless for survival. These needs include the need for companionship, the need for laughter, the need for beauty, the need to know the universe about it. These are the beginning needs. As the incarnation begins to accumulate, further needs are discovered. The need to trade, the need to love, the need to be loved, the need to elevate animalistic behaviors to a more universal perspective. During the first portion of third density cycles, incarnations are automatic and occur rapidly upon the cessation of energy complexes of the physical vehicle. There is a small need to review or to heal the experiences of the incarnation, as what you would call the energy centers begin to be activated to a higher extent. More of the content of experience during incarnation deals with the lessons of love. Thus, the time, as you may understand it, between incarnations is lengthened to give appropriate attention to the review and to the healing of experiences of the previous incarnation. At some point in third density, the green ray energy center becomes activated, and at that point, incarnation ceases to be automatic. Questioner: when incarnation ceases to become automatic, I am assuming that the entity can decide when he needs to reincarnate for the benefit of his own learning? Does he also select his parents? Ra: I am Ra. This is correct. Questioner: at this time in our cycle, near the end, what percentage of the entities, approximately, incarnating, are making their own choices? Ra: I am Ra. The approximate percentage is 54%. Questioner: thank you. During this first 25,000-year cycle, was there any industrial development at all? Was there any machinery available during this period to the people? Ra: I am Ra. Using the term machine to the meaning which you ascribe, the answer is no. However, there were, shall we say, various implements of wood and rock which were used in order to obtain food and for the use in aggression. Questioner: at the end of the first 25,000-year cycle, then, was there any physical change that occurred rapidly, like that which occurs at a 75,000-year cycle, or is it just an indexing time for a harvesting period? Ra: I am Ra. There was no change except that which, according to intelligent energy, or what you may term physical evolution, suited physical complexes to their environment, this being the color of their skin due to the area of the sphere upon which they lived, the gradual growth of peoples due to the improved intake of foodstuffs. Questioner: then we have a condition where, at the end of the first 25,000-year period, I would say I am guessing that the Guardians discovered that there was no harvest of either positive or negatively oriented entities. Tell me, then, what happened, what action was taken, etc. Ra: I am Ra. There was no action taken except to remain aware of the possibility of a calling for help or understanding among the entities of this density. The Confederation is concerned with the preservation of the conditions conducive to learning. This, for the most part, revolves about the primal distortion of free will. Questioner: then the Confederation gardeners did nothing, I am assuming, until some of the plants in their garden, shall I say, call them for help? Is this correct? Ra: I am Ra. This is correct. Questioner: when did the first call occur, and how did it occur? Ra: the first calling was approximately 46,000 of your years ago. This calling was those of Maldek. These entities were aware of their need for rectifying the consequences of their actions and were in some confusion in an incarnate state as to the circumstances of their incarnation. The unconscious being aware, the conscious being quite confused. This created a calling. The Confederation sent love and light to these entities. Questioner: how did the Confederation send this love and light? Precisely what did they do? Ra: I am Ra. There dwell within the Confederation planetary entities who, from their planetary spheres, do nothing but send love and light as pure streamings to those who call. This is not in the form of conceptual thought, but of pure and undifferentiated love. Questioner: Did the first distortion of the law of one require then that equal time, shall I say, be given to self-service oriented group? Ra. I am Ra. In this case, this was not necessary for some of your time due to the orientation of the entities. Questioner. What was their orientation? Ra. The orientation of these entities was such that the aid of the Confederation was not perceived. Questioner. Since it was not perceived, it was not necessary to balance this? Is this correct? Ra. I am Ra. This is correct. What is necessary to balance is opportunity. When there is ignorance, there is no opportunity. When there exists a potential, then each opportunity shall be balanced. This balancing caused by not only the positive and negative orientation of those offering aid, but also the orientation of those requesting aid. Questioner. I see. I want to clear up a point here then. When was the first contact by the Orion group in years? Ra. I am Ra. As we have said, the Orion group attempted contact approximately 60,000 of your years in the past as you measure time. Questioner. I'm sorry. I meant the first attempt in the second major cycle. I'm now working in the second 25,000 years. How many years ago was the Orion group's attempt in that cycle? Ra. I am Ra. The Orion group next attempted in more fertile territory, approximately 3600 of your years in the past as you measure time. Questioner. In other words, there was no attempt 46,000 years ago by the Orion group to contact. Is this correct? Ra. I am Ra. This is correct. Questioner. As we progress into the second 25,000 year cycle, did at this time, during this period, was this the period of Lemuria? Ra. I am Ra. This is incorrect. However, those who escaped the destruction of Lemuria by natural catastrophe, and were thus of Lemurian background, continued their learned teaching at locations ranging from your South America onward through the Americas as you know them, and continuing over what was at that time a bridge which no longer exists. There were those in what you would call Russia. Tape ends. Questioner. Just to quickly refresh my mind, how many years ago did Lemuria suffer its catastrophe? Ra. I am Ra. This was approximately 50,000 of your years ago. The origins being approximately 53,000. So 53,000 of your years ago. The damage being completed in the last small cycle of the first master cycle. Questioner. Did you mean to say master or major cycle? Ra. I am Ra. The appropriate sound vibration complex is major cycle. Questioner. Thank you. Then did the ending of the first major cycle have something to do with the destruction of Lemuria, or did this destruction just happen to occur at the end of that cycle? Ra. I am Ra. There is a confluence of energies at the ending of a major cycle. This encouraged what was already an inevitable adjustment in the movement of the surfaces of your planetary sphere. Questioner. Thank you very much. I apologize for being so stupid in making my questions, but this has cleared up a point nicely for me. Thank you. Then, in this second 25,000-year major cycle, was there any great civilization that developed? Ra. I am Ra. In the sense of greatness of technology, there was no great societies during this cycle. There was some advancement among those of Deneb who had chosen to incarnate as a body in which you would call China. There were appropriately positive steps in activating the green ray energy complex in many portions of your planetary sphere, including the Americas, the continent which you call Africa, the island with which you call Australia, and that which you know as India, as well as various scattered peoples. None of these became what you would name great, as the greatness of Lemuria or Atlantis is known to you due to formation of strong social complexes, and in the case of Atlantis, very great technological understandings. However, in the South American area of your planetary sphere as you know it, there grew to be a great vibratory distortion towards love. These entities were harvestable at the end of the second major cycle without even having formed a strong social or technological complexes. This will be the final question and completion of this session. Is there a query we may answer quickly before we close, as this instrument is somewhat depleted? Questioner. I just wanted to apologize for a bit of confusion on my part in carrying on the second 25,000 years. I would just like to ask if there's anything I could do to make the instrument more comfortable. We would hope to have a second session later today. Ra, I am Ra. You may observe a slight misalignment between book, candle, and perpendicularity of sensor. This is not significant, but as we have said, the cumulative effect upon this instrument are not well. You are conscientious. It is well to have a second session given the appropriate exercising of manipulation of this instrument's physical complex. I am Ra. I leave you in the love and the light of the one infinite Creator. Go forth, therefore, rejoicing in the power and the peace of the one Creator. Adonai. Yeah, this one covers a lot of really, really good information. I've got a really, really awesome question, too. We're going to cover that question before I get into the next session, 22. But, of course, a couple things I want to kind of get into. First off, channeling. Channeling is something every single one of us can do. It's one of these things, though, that needs to be learned how to do it properly. If you just open yourself up, well, let's put it this way. When you open yourself up, if you're not aware of how kind of negative works and positive works, you will kind of fall to the dark side. It just accidentally will happen. It's just how it works. If you understand the difference and understand how evil works, you'll stop it and catch it because you'll realize this thing's being negative. It's talking mean. It's not saying nice stuff. It's talking about chaos. It's talking about things that are scary. It's like it's bringing up this calamity. That's how you know you're not talking to positive being. When you talk to your higher self, which is what many recommend, and you do it in a controlled fashion, and you learn how to learn and disseminate between good info and bad info, you can actually get through this process. But this is a process. Every single one of us does it. It happens unconsciously for most of us. We get influenced. And if you're not paying attention and you're not really aware, that influencing is part of the programming. It actually keeps you kind of locked down, keeps you believing crazy stuff. You'll be like, oh, there's no way. 9/11, those buildings just fell down because the steel got really hot. So this will happen for a lot of people. It's a timing thing, I guess. Our state of mind or heart, it's extremely important. Whatever we're doing, whatever we're going into, however we're moving forward through this time in history, how you are in your heart, that state of mind, that green ray energy, they refer to it as here frequently, but it's your heart chakra. It's the fourth chakra. Very important. Jump between third and four. I've talked about that before. This is very important. Again, it's one of the things that either A, you've already done, or B, need to do because you're here to help. But that chakra needs to be cleaned up. Spectra, they brought up, I've heard of this. It's been brought into movies. I think this might have just been a group that was doing some probably negative stuff, maybe tied in with UFOs. I don't know. These guys were very into like ufology type stuff. And so I don't know exactly where they were at with Spectra. Again, like I said, I think it's been in some of the Guardians movies or some of the those types of movies, those Marvel Comics movies. They talk about the knot that the Maldek planet people experienced. One of the things that happened and what they realized, and whether you understand this or not, and I don't remember where I get it. I think it might be Law of One. Later we'll come to this information. If not, it's from someplace else. When nuclear weapons have been used in the past, the flash, the instant everything changes, has been very, very confusing. Typically, and I've helped a number of people pass. I've helped a number of people move through dying. It was when, cancer is coming through, just a number of people I've helped. And there's some very key things that always happen, especially when you realize you can look for them. What happens when nuclear type things occur, flash, everything's gone, it messes with it puts you into a knot. It puts you into a place where you don't know, you start to, because everything you imagine immediately happens, right? So imagine being there alone and maybe not having a lot, just maybe you still see like everything around you, but you're like, oh my God, are we at war? And you see maybe the cloud or something and you're like, oh, I bet we're at war. I wonder if bad guys are coming. And then all of a sudden you'll see bad guys coming and you're like, crap, I need a weapon. And then all of a sudden there's a weapon there. And you pick up the weapon and you begin to fight, believing that you're still alive, believing that you're fighting something that actually exists, but in reality, it's your manifestation because nobody's been able to come to you. Nobody's been able to help. Now, typically when people die and start to die, unless it happens suddenly, those are slightly different stories, but when it's coming up on you, you'll start to see people. You'll start having dreams. You'll start to, like when I say see people, I mean people that are dead already. It'll start to creep in to your reality and you'll stop. Like you'll pay attention, you'll notice. And so when your life ends, your consciousness never stops. And it's confusing to some. But if you're prepared to go into it and you're sort of expecting to see people that are dead, and then that day finally happens, maybe where you do die, like my mom, she just turned her head towards the light, towards the other window, and just closed her eyes, and that was it. Never to be again. And so from her standpoint, consciously, there was somebody there that was like, hey, Wendy, you ready to finally be able to walk again and have energy? And she's like, God, am I ever? And immediately got up out of the bed, and they started off to her journey. And it reminds me, again, one of my favorite movies that I think does one of the best jobs at it, in just covering a lot of this concept in general, is What Dreams May Come, that Robin Williams was in. It's an amazing movie. And it covers things that are beyond anything. So again, all that nuclear shock, you shock people so badly. That's why nukes can't be used. They're confused. It really messes people up. It created a knot that literally took eons to fix because these people were confused, creating their own crazy realities. Now, they keep referring to everybody as gardeners. The reason, and I want to bring this up, and this is maybe going to be woo for some people, or some people aren't going to be ready for this, so I apologize for that. But for those that have done any of the Biglino readings, this will make a lot of sense to you. But the idea of Eden, garden, the Garden of Eden, gardeners, what that was really about, and many suggest, and I think Biglino is 100% on the money, is that the Garden of Eden was more of a genetic factory, let's say that, right? Factory, place, laboratory, whatever. It was a place where genetics were done, and once those genetics passed certain tests, were then released to see if they could do what needed to be done. They needed to enhance the human race because they wanted us to be able to do stuff for them, be slaves, but we needed to be smart enough to rationalize our way through the day, right? We couldn't just be retards. So they weren't cool with that. And for people that are offended by that word, yeah, I'm probably going to offend you a bunch. So only the plane of forgetting. This is the only place where that can happen. And again, I referenced just a moment ago What Dreams May Come. One of the parts in the movie that's so beautiful is when he, and I don't want to spoil it, but he goes down into hell, essentially, to try to find his wife. Now, that concept is a little different than most would realize, but in the process of going down to find her, he starts to lose himself. He starts to forget. He starts to go into her illusion. And that was his risk. He's like, I love her so much, I'm going to do this. It was a beautiful part of the movie. And almost got trapped in her illusion, which was her hell. And he was trying to pull her out of it. And she snapped too because of him. And it was, again, sort of powerful. So this is part of what happens when we come into this world. It's why I've recently talked about how there's an AI that kind of messed this whole place up. And so we not only forget, but they hijack it once we're forgotten. And that's just part of coming here. That's part of the game. You don't know. And it's been the land of Nod for a long time. So it's very, very crazy how it actually experienced. Does one choose their parents? When you become high enough up, it's not ridiculously high, but when you get far enough along your evolution, if you will, you absolutely choose your parents. You choose a lot of situations. Oftentimes you'll choose how you die. There's a lot that goes into it. Again, for people that are having a hard time with the idea that we live more than once, we do live more than once. It's not like you get reincarnated as a cockroach. No. You come back again as a human, sometimes man, sometimes woman. You have different lives, different ways of living, different things that happen to you. Sometimes you're crippled because you need to learn lessons. There's a lot of aspects that we learn to evolve our souls so we can be harvestable. You don't just get one shot at it. That's just so absurd. It would be impossible. It's too hard, especially with these short lifespans. Maybe with a 900-year lifespan, if you lived in 900 years, I guarantee you we'll get you across the finish line. I guarantee you. Probably one life. Who knows? Maybe two, but still. The concept of Lemuria, they moved into South America. They also moved up over in the Alaskan Bridge off into Russia. So in all honesty, this is probably more along the Caucasian group, or really that white European kind of concept really was part of that original Lemurian group that got destroyed in the very first cycle. So every 25,000 years, right, at the end of a major cycle happens. So at the end of the first 25,000 year cycle, Lemuria, squish, just like grape, right? 25,000 years after that, pretty much right where the Atlantean fall happened. And 25,000 years after that, that's right now. So, fun. We're in good company when it comes to the big picture. And then, let's see, first cycle, again, I just said that. How perfect is that? How perfect is that, people? All right, and I got this one question that, okay, I guess we got a couple questions. We're gonna hit a couple of these first. Patriots Daryl's first question: is the channeler aware of the information being channeled, or does she have no memory of it? So it's funny how you mentioned that, and this is one of the fun parts about channeling. You hear it real time while it's happening, and if for a second consciously you focus on anything that is happening in it, you break the channel. So the way channeling works is it's stream of consciousness, is what I frequently like to call it, because it's a much funner word, but stream of consciousness, it's one of these things where you just kind of step into the now, and you just blah, 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 right? And the second you interrupt, which I frequently break myself all the time, and it's not good, by the way, I'd probably just shut up and let myself do my thing. But when I do, sometimes it's funny, but when I do that, it breaks the channel. And then you've got to get back into the channel. So are you aware of it? Yes. If you try to interact with it, or if you think about it, or if you don't just let it flow through, if you will, and not, it's kind of like meditation. Like I always talk about how you want to try to keep your mind at ease and at peace. And if thoughts pop into your head, you just let them go. You let them go. You don't hold on to them. You don't think about them. You're like, oh, I totally got to get onions at the store. Shoot. Right? Like that ruins your meditation. Not just because it's onions and it'll make you cry, but because you're just supposed to let it go. It doesn't matter. Who cares? Focus on your breathing. That's why you focus on breathing. So it will cause some issues in those regards if you let it. If you don't just kind of channel and continue channeling, you'll be good there. Let's see. Ruwalt 77 asks, can someone please remind me which cycle we are in? We are technically in that last 25,000 year cycle. So the 75,000 years is the whole cycle that they're referencing us. And it's the larger harvest cycle. There's been 3 sub-cycles. We're in the last final sub-cycle, but also the final cycle of the particular harvest that we're in. Hopefully that helps. Ruwalt. Patriots Daryl asked another question. Could the same energy be affecting our magnetic field right now? I think the magnetic field changing right now is indicative of the fact that every 25,000 years, calamitous things happen. So we're in another one of those cycles. Things are happening. The sun's gotten white. Things are, we've got different experiences. So a lot of the different planets actually, even right now, are experiencing weird weather patterns, or their atmospheres have gotten screwed up, or they like Jupiter, I want to say one storm's winding down that one red spot, but there's another one spinning up. Saturn's got some weird stuff going on. So there's something happening right now. And whether we're protecting ourselves to some degree, or even being somewhat protected, maybe by friends, who knows? But yeah, so great questions. You guys are asking some good stuff. All right, let's kick into session 22 and see if we can knock this guy out of the park. This one's actually a little shorter, I think mainly because there was a problem with the way the channeling was happening. So somebody had asked the question about the lady, I forget her name, Carla, using LSD. And the problem with LSD is, I've done it once or twice, maybe. The problem with it is when you do it, it takes a lot out of you. And like if you try to follow up and do it again the following day, they always say you need to double up. And it's not that you overdose on it, but you start to require more and more and more of it to be able to get to the same place that you were. And what was happening with her is it was wearing out too soon. It's effective because it does kind of have like a speedy component to it. So it gets you in a place where you can very easily stream energy. I mean, I can tell you a crazy experience I had, first rave. Whew, man, like I was spinning around a whole group of people. Like I was out of my body completely. It was wild as hell. So again, there's, you can, and you guys don't have to agree with anything I've experienced. Like, I mean, you shouldn't per se, right? Like, that's the hard part about it. Law of confusion. If you don't like it, don't believe it, man. Nah, of course I didn't do that. It was because of, whatever. There's swamp gas and stuff. Like, so again, this is part of the experience for all of us, and we are going to get through this together. And many of us may be coming at it from slightly different angles, but we ultimately are all going to get to the same place, and it's going to be beautiful when we get there. Law of Session 22 talks about lifespans, I think, a lot more. And again, I like to use the example of dogs and cats. Just think if your dog could live 50 years. Just think of how cool that was. I just say dogs, cats too, for you cat lovers. I can't understand why you would want one of those things, but yes, I'm kidding. I've experienced a couple good ones. Some of you guys, I saw the claws, but dogs are way better. Anyway, what if is really where we're at. We are in a place where we're changing reality, and it's because we're consciously all coming to terms with this. That's why I think this information is so important right now. I mean, it came out in 81, but right now, 45 years later, here we are talking about it. So this is a big deal. This is game time, and this is where we're at. And I think it's important for a lot of people to understand this. So here's session 22. I'm going to shut up for a little while and make everybody happy. Right here. This is On the Fringe, doing Law of One for you guys. The Law of One, Session 22, recorded February 10th, 1981. Ra. I am Ra. I greet you in the love and in the light of the infinite creator. I communicate now. Questioner. The instrument would like to ask a couple questions of you. I'll get them out of the way first. The instrument would like to know why she smells the incense at various times during the day in various places. Ra. I am Ra. This instrument has spent a lifetime in dedication to service. This has brought this instrument to the nexus in this space-time with the conscious and unconscious distortions towards service, with the further conscious distortion towards service by communication. Each time, as you would call it, that we perform this working, our social memory complex vibrational distortion meshes more firmly with this instrument's unconscious distortions towards service. Thus, we are becoming a part of this instrument's vibratory complex, and it a part of ours. This occurs upon the unconscious level, the level whereby the mind has gone down through the roots of the consciousness, which you may call cosmic. This instrument is not consciously aware of this slow changing of the meshing vibratory complex. However, as the dedication on both levels continues and the workings continue, there are signals sent from the unconscious in a symbolic manner. Because this instrument is extremely keen in its sense of smell, this association takes place unconsciously, and the thought form of the odor is witnessed by the entity. Questioner. Secondly, she would like to know why she feels more healthy now after she does these sessions. She generally feels more healthy as time goes on. Ra. I am Ra. This is a function of the free will of the entity. This entity has, for many of your years, prayed a certain set of sound vibration complexes before opening to communication. Before the trance state was achieved, this prayer remained within the conscious portion of the mind complex and, though helpful, was not as effective as the consequence of this prayer, as you would call this vibrational sound complex, which then goes directly into the unconscious level, thus more critically affecting the communication from the spiritual complex. Also, this entity has begun, due to this working, to accept certain limitations which it placed upon itself in order to set the stage for services such as it now performs. This also is an aid to the realigning the distortion of the physical complex with regard to pain. Questioner. Thank you. I'll ask a couple of questions to clear up the end of the second cycle, the second major cycle. And then we'll go on to the third and last of the major cycles. Can you tell me if the lifespan, the average lifespan, at the end of the second major cycle? Ra, I am Ra. By the end of the second major cycle, the lifespan was, as you know it, with certain variations among geographically isolated peoples more in harmony with intelligent energy and less bellicose. Questioner, can you tell me the length of the span, average span, in years at the end of the second major cycle? Ra, I am Ra. The average is perhaps misleading. To be precise, many spent approximately 35 to 40 of your years in one incarnation, with the possibility, not considered abnormal, of a lifespan approaching 100 of your years. Questioner, then can I assume then that this drastic drop from 700-year lifespan to one less than 100 years in length during the second 25,000-year period was because of an intensification of a condition of lack of service to others? Is this correct? Ra, I am Ra. This is in part correct. By the end of the second cycle, the law of responsibility had begun to be effectuated by the increasing ability of entities to grasp those lessons which there are to be learned in this density. Thus, entities had discovered many ways to indicate a bellicose nature, but not as tribes or what you call nations, but in personal relationships, each with the other, the concept of barter having given way in many cases to the concept of money, also the concept of ownership having won ascendancy over the concept of non-ownership on an individual or group basis. Each entity then was offered many more subtle ways of demonstrating either service towards others or service towards self with distortion of the manipulation of others. As each lesson was understood, those lessons of sharing, of giving, of receiving and free gratitude, each lesson could be rejected in practice. Without demonstrating the fruits of such learned teaching, the lifespan became greatly reduced. As for the ways of honor duty were not being accepted. Questioner, would this shortened lifespan help the entity in any way in that he would have more at times in between incarnations to review his mistakes? Or would this shortened lifespan hinder him? Ra, I am Ra. Both are correct. The shortening of the lifespan is a distortion of the law of one, which suggests that an entity not receive more experience in more intensity than it may bear. This is only an effect upon an individual level and does not hold sway over planetary or social complexes. Thus, the shortened lifespan is due to the necessity of removing an entity from the intensity of experience which ensues when wisdom and love are, having been rejected, reflected back into the consciousness of the Creator without being accepted as part of the self. This then causing the entity to have the need for healing and for much evaluation of the incarnation. The incorrectness lies in the truth that, given appropriate circumstances, a much longer incarnation in your space-time continuum is very helpful for continuing this intensive work until conclusions have been reached through the catalytic process. Questioner, you spoke of the South American group that was harvestable at the end of the second cycle. How long was their average lifespan at the end of the second cycle? Ra, I am Ra. This isolated group had achieved lifespans stretching upward towards the 900-year lifespan appropriate to this density. Questioner, then I am assuming the planetary action that we're experiencing now, which shortens, it seems, all lifespans here, was not strong enough at that time to affect them and shorten their lifespan regardless? Is this correct? Ra, I am Ra. This is correct. It is well to remember that at that nexus in space-time, great isolation was possible. Questioner, about how many people populated the Earth totally at that time, that is, incarnated in the physical at any one time? Ra, I am Ra. I am assuming that you intend to query regarding the number of incarnate mind-body-spirit complexes at the end of the second major cycle. This number being approximately 345,000 entities. Questioner, approximately how many were harvestable out of that total number? Ra, I am Ra. There were approximately 150 entities harvestable. Questioner. A very small number. Then, at the next cycle started, are these the entities then that stayed to work on the planet? Ra. I am Ra. These entities were visited by the Confederation and became desirous of remaining in order to aid the planetary consciousness. This is correct. Questioner. What type of visit did the Confederation make to this group of 150 entities? Ra. I am Ra. A light being appeared before that which may be called a shield of light. It spoke of the oneness and infinity of all creation and of those things which await those ready for harvest. It described in golden words the beauties of love as lived. It then allowed a telepathic linkage to progressively show those who were interested the plight of third density when seen as a planetary complex. It then left. Questioner. And did all of these entities then decide to stay and help during the next 25,000-year cycle? Ra. I am Ra. This is correct. As a group then stayed, there were those peripherally associated with this culture which did not stay. However, they were not able to be harvested either, and so, beginning at a very highest, shall we say, of the sub-octave of third density, repeated this density. Many of those who have long been of a loving nature are not wanderers, but those of this particular origin of second cycle. Questioner. Are all of these entities still with us in this cycle? Ra. I am Ra. The entities repeating the third density major cycle have, in some few cases, been able to leave. These entities have chosen to join their brothers and sisters, as you would call these entities. Questioner. Were any of these entities names that we would know from our historical past, that have appeared in incarnated beings we find in our history? Ra. I am Ra. The one known as the sound vibration complex, St. Augustine, is of such a nature. The one known as St. Teresa, of such a nature. The one known as St. Francis of Assisi, of such a nature. These entities, being of monastic background, as you would call it, found incarnation in the same type of ambiance appropriate for further learning. Questioner. Well then, as the cycle terminated 25,000 years ago, what was the reaction of the Confederation to the lack of harvest? Ra. I am Ra. We became concerned. Questioner. Was any action taken immediately, or did you wait for a call? Ra. I am Ra. The Council of Saturn acted only in allowing the entry into the third density of other mind-body-spirit complexes of third density, not wanderers, but those who sought further third density experience. This was done randomly, so that free will would not be violated, for there were not yet a call. Questioner. Was the next action taken by the Confederation when a call occurred? Ra. I am Ra. This is correct. Questioner. Who or what group produced this call, and what action was taken by the Confederation? Ra. The calling was that of Atlanteans. This calling was for that what you would call understanding, with the distortion towards helping other selves. The action taken is that which you take part in at this time, the impression of information through channels, as you would call them. Questioner. Was this first calling then at a time before Atlantis became technologically advanced? Ra. I am Ra. This is basically correct. Questioner. Then did the technological advancements of Atlantis come because of this call? I am assuming the call was answered to bring them the law of one and the law of love as a distortion of the law of one. But did they also then get technological information that caused them to grow into such a highly technological society? Ra. I am Ra. Not at first. At about the same time as we first appeared in the skies over Egypt, and continuing thereafter, other entities of the Confederation appeared unto Atlanteans who had reached a level of philosophical understanding, shall we misuse this word, which was consonant with communication, to encourage and inspire studies in the mystery of unity. However, requests being made for healing and other understandings, information was passed having to do with crystals and the building of pyramids, as well as temples, as you would call them, which were associated with training. Questioner. Was this training the same type of initiatory training that was done with the Egyptians? Ra. I am Ra. This training was different in that the social complex was more, shall we say, sophisticated and less contradictory and barbarous in its ways of thinking. Therefore, the temples were temples of learning, rather than attempt at being made to totally separate and put upon a pedestal the healers. Questioner: then were there what we would call priests trained in these temples? Ra: I am Ra. You would not call them priests in the sense of celibacy or of obedience and of poverty. They were priests in the sense of those devoted to learning. The difficulties became apparent as those trained in this learning began to attempt the use crystal powers for those things other than healing, and they were involved not only with learning, but became involved with what you would call the governmental structure. Questioner: was all of their information given to them in a way that you're giving our information now, through an instrument such as this instrument? Ra: I am Ra. There were visitations from time to time, but none of importance in the, shall we say, historical passage of events in your space-time continuum. Questioner: was it necessary for them to have a unified social complex for these visitations to occur? What conditions were what conditions were necessary for these visitations to occur? Ra: I am Ra. The conditions were two: the calling of a group of people whose square overcame the integrated resistance of those unwilling to search or learn. The second requirement, the relative naivete of those members of the Confederation who felt that direct transfer of information would necessarily be as helpful for Atlanteans as it had been for the Confederation entity. Questioner: I see then. What you're saying is these naive Confederation entities had had the same thing happen to them in the past, so they were doing the same thing for the Atlantean entities. Is this correct? Ra: I am Ra. This is correct. We remind you that we are one with the naive members of that confederation and are still attempting to recoup the damage for which we feel responsibility. It is our duty, as well as our honor, to continue with your peoples. Therefore, until all traces of the distortions of our teach learnings have been embraced by their opposite distortions and balance achieved. Questioner: I see. Then, I will state the picture I now have of Atlantis, and you can tell me if I am correct. We have a condition where a large number of groups of this entity of Atlantis had started at least going in the direction of the Law of One and living the Law of One for their call to be heard by the Confederation. This call was heard because, using the Law of Squares, it overrode the opposition of the Atlantity entities that were not calling. The Confederation then used channels such as we now for communication and also made contact directly. But this turned out to be a mistake because it was perverted by some of the entities of Atlantis. Is this correct? Ra: this is correct with one exception. There is only one law. There is the Law of One. Other so-called laws are distortions of this law, some of them primal and most important for progress to be understood. However, it is well that each so-called law, which we also call way, be understood as a distortion rather than a law. There is no multiplicity to the Law of One. This will be the final question in length of this working. Please ask it now. Questioner: what was the only question I was going to ask that I can think of? Could you give me the average lifespan of the Atlantean population? Ra: I am Ra. The average lifespan, as we have said, is misleading. The Atlanteans were, in early part of their cultural experience, used to lifespans from 70 to 140 years, this being, of course, approximate. Due to the increasing desire for power, the lifetime decreased rapidly in the latter stages of this civilization, and thus the healing and rejuvenating information was requested. Do you have any brief queries before we close? Questioner: is there anything we can do to make the instrument more comfortable or anything we can do for her? Ra: I am Ra. The instrument is well. It is somewhat less easy to maintain clear contact during a time when some or one of the entities in the circle of working is or are not fully conscious. We request that entities in the circle be aware that their energy is helpful for increasing the vitality of this contact. We thank you for the being conscientious in this asking. I am Ra. It is a great joy to leave you in the love and the light of the one infinite Creator. Go forth, therefore, rejoicing in the power and the peace of the one Creator. Adonai. That was a whip crack at the end there. I don't know if you guys caught that. It was like a slap to the visitor. There was a visitor there, and the visitor was not the right energy. He was energy. Again, energy is very important. Energy is everything. We've had Tesla tell us that. Einstein's even, I think, said it possibly. So again, crazy stuff. All right, so session 22, and then we got some bitch and ass questions that A-Score has been kind enough to help with. Thank you. You are A-Score. Thank you, by the way. Big call out. A-Score is a big help, especially on this show, because there's questions, and she's got direct access to me, and she's just so kind. So I appreciate you. All right, channeling, just real quick. Channeling involves filters. So if anybody that you're listening to that's a channeler, and they've got strong beliefs of any kind, okay, and right, wrong, and different. I'm just examples, flat earth, examples, religions, examples, I don't know, even health stuff, where just, all sugar is bad. It could be, by the way. Again, all these things, right? I'm just trying to come up with just crazy ideas, right? If they have strong beliefs, their channelings will, that taste will come, right? Like it's like aging something in a barrel, like a whiskey barrel versus another kind of tobacco barrel. Like it's one coffee that I like. They actually age it in a tobacco barrel, and it gives it a weird flavor, but it's delicious when you drink it, right? But that is part of the filter. It imbues some flavor to whatever is coming out. One of the keys when you're trying to do this kind of work, and this is what Carla or even Jane Roberts has done admirably well, some of the best. We had some of the goddesses come here back in the day. Michael Sala, Dr. Sala was talking about this, and he called him that, and he was right. These ladies were, and I was lucky enough to know a couple just extreme guys. My life has been, I've been very blessed, and this is obviously why I came here. I've been trained to be who I am. May not seem like I'm good at what I do, but oddly am. So we're going to keep doing it this way, as strange as it seems. But we've got a lot that we are all waking up to. And so filters kind of shape the information we provide. Right, wrong, and different. Just if you understand you're receiving someone's filters, sometimes you can actually learn to see through them. So it's not that big a deal. Anyway, sorry. I had my moment. Years in living. So 900 years initially at the start of the first 25,000 year cycle. So 75,000 years is the total cycle. Okay. And there's 3 sub-cycles that occurred within the 75,000 year cycle. Just try to explain that a little bit. So at the end of the 75,000 year cycle, that is the end of the game, right? There's larger cycles that happen within, but 75,000 year cycle, that's the final harvest. You've had 3 goes, 3 chances, 3 shots, 3 strikes. Wonder where we got that from. So 25,000 year was the first mark. When that happened, Lemuria collapsed. That was the end of that civilization. At the 50,000 year mark, that was pretty much the end of Atlantis, and that collapsed. At the end of the 75,000 year mark, well, that's us right now. It's cool. We're going to experience this, and we're going to rise above it and be fine, but that is what's going on. So as we finally get rid of a lot of these negative influences, like the fact that we don't need to kill each other, for example, just spoiler alert, don't kill one another. Yeah, bad idea. Once we stop doing that kind of stuff, once we stop warring, once we stop doing a lot of these, unfortunately, I want to say Maldekian kinds of behaviors, once you stop, then we start actually moving more towards that 900-year lifespan. Now, people talking about med beds and all this kind of nonsense, whatever. And I'm not saying it's nonsense from the standpoint. I'm just saying the bigger problem is the negativity. And getting rid of that and transitioning into more of a positive focused, positive thinking, positive oriented, heart-centered, green ray chakra, fourth energy center, like all that kind of nonsense. That's going to change the world. That's the key. That's the hard part for many because it requires them to do stuff. So, yeah. Let's see. Watching dogs and cats navigate each other. It's just kind of funny because they learn. I don't know if some of you guys, I've seen this a few times, some videos. I've watched a lot of animal videos because they're just precious. And you'll see between the two animals how they interact. You know, it's like, who did this? And the one will like narc out the other almost always, or at least the one will act weird. Like, there is a separation. There's an understanding. Having pets is so awesome because and kids are not quite the same thing, believe it or not. Pets are kind of more unique in that you get to help a second density being get graduated up to third. A lot of the pets that you and I are helping right now are ones that are going to become people in the next 75,000 year cycle. And it's freaking awesome because you get it. You see that little soul inside of them. You know, people, there's no soul. You know, well, bullshit. If you've ever had an actual pet that you loved. So that's pretty powerful. And they're learning the other self. Huge. It's fun when you watch them together because they even kind of get it amongst themselves. Some of them are stupid, you know, whatever. Can't help it. You always got your special ones. 345,000 total people in the first cycle. Or total beings, let's maybe say that. Only 150 graduated. Sorry, this is the second cycle. Nobody made it in the first cycle. Second cycle, there was 345,000 total potential graduates. 150 actually could have walked with the class. They chose not to in most all cases. Lifespan was pretty much shitty at that point. That's when things got really bad. This is when a lot of the fall was happening with Atlantis. The fall of Atlantis, I don't know, to a large extent, I think it led to the Exodus. The parts of the Bible that talks about the Exodus, I feel like is more related to that, but the Garden of Eden, Genesis goes way back to the very beginning, probably at beginning of the 75,000 year mark before Lemuria. And I think things changed. They even talked about at one point somewhere in here, the Chinese aspect kind of got brought in at one point. I forget the name of the group that they ascribed them to, but that was interesting. So again, 150 made it. Lifespan sucked. What they were essentially trying to do was shorten the lifespan here, and they would trap souls. So a lot of people talked about, like, it's like the Matrix, and they just like sucking energy off us. Yeah. They literally, and I've said it before in a recent video I did, this was like an AI, like, controlled area. So you would go into this part of the game, if you will, and this is the part where you'd go in and you'd forget who you were. Normally it was okay, and you'd come back out and you're like, wow, that was a cool experience, right? But what they did is they made it where you'd end up getting sucked back into the game over and over and over, and they'd catch you. And they were literally catching souls. I know it sounds insane. I know. It sounds insane. That's what this whole thing's been about. And that's what we're busting open, and what we have been. That's why certain experts, me and many others, are here to do this. So Council of Saturn's a big deal. They talk about that. Also has to do with what the fact that nobody else was allowed to come here. There was a quarantine on this planet. You couldn't come, couldn't go. Now, a lot of people don't understand there's already a bunch of stuff here already, and a bunch of things here too. So whether something is necessarily interplanetary or extraplanetary is questionable, and that's one thing people probably need to understand. Every tool can be a weapon. This is one of the problems with the evil thinking, or the evil process, the Maldekian way, if you will. And so this is the thing that we're shedding. Tools can be awesome. A lot of people are possibly freaking out about AI right now. Tools can be awesome if used for awesome things, or can be horrific if used against us. And it always depends on who's at the wheel. Folks, we're taking back this planet. The meek shall inherit the earth. This is happening in this time frame. Like, we are taking it back. Priest, and they were talking about priests back in there, and really, Ra talks about how they're more learners. The priests back in the day weren't necessarily like religious-y like we are now, as much as trying to find out as much information as possible so they could disseminate and share that. You know what I mean? Like trying to, well, with knowledge is power, they basically would say too. There's another way to put it. Ra's trying to fix up their mess up. So back in the day, and I kind of feel like I'm tied to this in a lot of ways, I think. That's probably why I've got this strong desire to help this information get disseminated. But a a lot of things get failed sometimes when you allow yourself to feel like you're separated and separate. And so a lot of the people they were talking to back in the day, I think King Tut or one of them they referenced at some point or have already. And the individual kind of became sort of elevated in society. And through that process, kind of separated themselves from everybody else. They suddenly became different, separate, more service to self. And that was where a lot of things started to go off the rails. And the law of one people were like, all right, damn it, we went too far into the showing our physical self and doing all right. So they started doing it through channeling to allow law of confusion to play a larger role. So again, just crazy stuff, how it's all in there. Let's see. 101. I'm just laughing. Atlanta. He misspoke. It might have been me, or I read it incorrectly. But I said entity. I think that's funny. It was just me making a whoops. And then finally, visitor. Why did I put visitor? Visitor. We're all visitors. Visitor. I don't remember why I put visitor. Whatever. It's okay. We got some questions we're gonna get, and then we'll pull this over to while we're at it, and we'll see what new stuff pops up in the meantime. I still want your help, A-score, if you don't mind. All right, so we got a few questions. First off, think 2000. Sunday. Think 2000. First, they got a bunch of questions. First off, question 1. What are all the laws? Well, the law of one is the laws, and everything else, like they said, they kind of went through it. Everything else is a distortion of the law of one. So there's laws that can follow the law of one, but ultimately it's the law of one. Or the simplest, and I think they said this recently, is like the law of love. Just love, the concept of love. Loving is a powerful separator of, you're different than me. And that's a big part of kind of what the law of one is really about, is understanding that third density separation, and so you can move towards the love understanding fourth density, So it may not make a lot of sense right now, but I think if we progress further through the law of one stuff, again, there's 108 sessions overall, so we've got a little ways to go. Let's see. Second question. Do you have any meditations, mediations, I think it's meditations probably, that you recommend? Meditation is something that I highly recommend you search for yourself. Recommending a meditation is I don't know, I get nervous about it because really it should be something that you learn yourself, and it seems many people have different techniques. I was just listening to someone that I was like respecting everything they said, and then they said how their meditation was, and it was different than mine. And I was like, ooh, weird. And it caught me off guard at the moment. And I was like, maybe that's how it's supposed to be for them. So I think it's important for each of us to find it. So I would say do a search, look for a book or videos or however you typically ingest information, and find your, you'll give it to yourself. You are the one that's initiating the search. You are the one that's going to bring the search back. I know we think AI is doing it and all this stuff, and really it's your higher self's controlling this. And it's going to bring you back what is going to best help you find your best meditation. For me, I've got one that I learned a long time ago. I mean, I was in martial arts even. I learned a version of a really cool meditation back then, and have since kind of expanded that same concept. So again, I know it sounds sucky. There's a lot of people that get kind of bummed when you do that sort of answer, but it's really important that you find your right answer, and me tainting that or saying, here's a book, and then that book necessarily even being attacked, even though it's the one I used. I think there is one I share, by the way, in my descriptions, typically, if you want. I mean, there is a meditation book I do offer. I would just say click on that. At least there's an option. Have you considered having a live chat event to discuss in Zoom calls for this group? That's a neat idea, and I'm not opposed to that. And that's something that might be able to work out, where we do something live immediately after, and maybe I just share it in the chat because the chat doesn't live forever anyways. We might be able to get something like that going. Maybe run another hour or so or more after, but hopefully not. Yeah, that's actually a good idea. Final question Is there anything we can do to make the instrument more comfortable, like get him a White Claw? Yeah, I would say a White Claw or a beer, please. Yes, you may. I actually responded back and said that's heck yeah on that last one. September asked a question, when we die, can we interact with people who have reincarnated already? Higher selves, definitely. Their conscious self, you can. It's going to sound kind of lame, but it's a really good sort of analogy and a really good way to kind of look at it, if you will. But like in Ghost, right? When he was trying to communicate with her and she thought she was feeling him and then she thought she was crazy, right? Like you can have that kind of experience, at least right now. The place that we're going, I think there's going to be a lot more of that consciousness veil, I think, is going to dissipate a lot more where we're all heading. But that's kind of my best answer I can give you on that question. Let's see. Rewalt77, if I heard this correctly, if a mind-body complex does not follow the law of one and reflexes negatively to the creator, when they die, they go into a healing space to start again. Yes, there is no evil that you can create that's so great that the creator won't take you back. Ever. It's one of the funnier things that we sort of believe here is that there is this concept of eternal damnation. No. The only damnation that ever occurs is when we ourselves separate from creator, when we ourselves choose to look at ourselves as separate, and we go into a place where we're alone and in despair. But we create that ourselves. It's not something that where God won't ever let us, and that can be eternal damnation, that can be fire, and that can lead into all sorts of behaviors that are evil, of course. But ultimately, at some point, most people do cry out for forgiveness after they've done all sorts of horrible things. And forgiveness is bestowed upon them, as much as that might seem horrible to some. It's all are able to start again. Now, I've heard of people getting dissolved back into the central sun and shit like that. I don't know if that happens. I don't know how. I don't feel like that vibes with me personally. Maybe there are places where that works, but that's definitely not something that I'm necessarily picking up, if you will. You're putting that down. I get you. I'm going to leave it right where it's at. It seems like a steaming pile of poo is what it looks like to me. Prozac projectile. So let's make sure. Yeah, gotcha. Cool. So in explaining Atlantis collapse, did an imbalance between service to self versus service to others create the collapse? My understanding is it was very much kind of like where we're at right now, where there was a ideology difference. We were there was a very spiritual component that wanted to kind of do very law of one type stuff and allow people to teach, learn, and all learn, teach, right? And, make some mistakes. But the other side was actually trying to steer it more into a control service to self kind of mechanism. And they had access to technologies that were pretty impressive, much like now. We're in the repeat of Atlantis, the end of the Lemurian cycle, repeated in Atlantis, and right now we're repeating it again. Different players, different storyline, different friends, same thing. So that is what's happening right now, is much the same. There's technology that can be utilized to absolutely destroy the planet, and a lot of us can actually get on board with it and be like, yeah, let's do this. It seems like a good idea because I saw the news and they told me that something bad happened. No. Frankly, I don't think we're allowed to. So, that's, I think in a nutshell, right? Like, Atlantis is fun. And the collapse of it actually took much time. The islands broke apart, and I still think there was a pole shift in there. I still think Atlantis is Antarctica. I think it's one of the reasons why there is a flat Earth theory is they don't want people to go down there, because if we got down there, we'd probably find some crazy stuff like they did. What was it, John Glenn or whatever? One of the astronaut dudes had a heart attack and shit while I was down there, so it was craziness. Anyways, folks, thank you. It's been another fun one. I don't want to drag it on longer than it needs to. We went an hour 20, basically. Arlene, again, thank you. You've been extraordinarily helpful. Again, I know this is a crazy topic, but we seem to have 222 is the number I'm seeing for how many people in the show right now. So again, thank you guys for being a part of this, and thank you for there being so many of you. I know some would say, "Damn, that's not that many." It's like, ooh, that's a lot actually. There's a lot of you guys. Thank you guys for being a part of this. We are a big part of the powerhouse that's changing this world. You guys and me. Well, I'm helping. We're going to continue to do that. That's why I always like to say where we go, when we go, all. But all said, we are going to go back into the outro of the Law of One. And I'll pull this over so I can actually react to people. But thank you guys for joining. Again, a lot of fun. We're going to do more of this next week. The next two sessions, 23 and 24. And I look forward to being with you guys. Talk to you soon. It's On the Fringe with Dan RadioStyle.
Meditation is supposed to be fun. It's not something you do as a grim duty. The trouble with religion as we know it is that it is so mixed up with grim duties. We do it because it's good for you. It's a kind of self-punishment. Well, meditation, when correctly done, has nothing to do with all that. It's a kind of digging the present. It's a kind of grooving with the eternal now. And brings us into a state of peace where we can understand that the point of life, the place where it's at, is simply here and now.
This moment is the creation of the universe. It's starting now. If you look back and wonder whether there was a big bang a long time ago, all you'll see is vanishing traces. The big bang is happening now. This is when the world begins. You're doing it. Only you're not doing it by straining. A you deeper than the straining you is doing all this. The same you that is growing your hair and coloring your eyes and making your thumbprints and all that. You don't think about it. You don't strain muscles to do it. But that is what is creating the world. Here it comes. Now. So instead of thinking that the past is the reality which explains everything that happens now, let's look at now.